Catherine had always been the kind of person who found solace in the quiet companionship of animals, particularly dogs. Growing up in a small suburban town, her family home was a sanctuary for stray animals. Her parents often joked that Catherine had a sixth sense for finding creatures in need of love and care. Among all the animals that came into her life, one dog stood out, a scruffy little stray with soulful brown eyes that she named Brian. Brian wasn't just another pet. He was Catherine's confidant, her shadow and her protector. She found him huddled under a park bench on a rainy afternoon when she was just 22 years old. Soaked and shivering, Brian seemed to understand that Catherine was his chance at a better life. From that day on, they were inseparable. Whether it was long walks through the woods, quiet evenings spent reading with Brian curled up at her feet, or his gentle nudges of comfort during her teenage heartbreaks, Brian became an irreplaceable part of Catherine's life. As Catherine grew older and life became more complicated, Brian remained a constant source of stability. Through college exams, job interviews, and the occasional bout of self-doubt, Brian's presence reminded her of the simplicity of love and loyalty. By the time she met Brooke, her future husband, Brian was already a well-loved member of her family. When Catherine and Brooke decided to marry, there was no question that Brian would come along, a symbol of the life she had built and the unconditional love she cherished. Marriage brought joy and new adventures. Catherine and Brooke were thrilled to start a family, and their excitement only grew when they discovered Catherine was expecting their first child. Throughout her pregnancy, Brian remained as attentive as ever. He seemed to understand that Catherine needed extra care, often resting his head gently on her growing belly or following her around the house as if on high alert. When the baby boy finally arrived, Brian's role in the family took on a whole new dimension. He was no longer just a companion, he became a guardian. Catherine often marveled at how Brian instinctively watched over the baby, lying near the crib and perking up at the slightest noise. While Brooke worked long hours to provide for their growing family, Brian became Catherine's partner in parenting, offering her a sense of security and unwavering support. Brian's bond with the baby was something Catherine could only describe as magical. He would sit patiently during late-night feedings, his eyes full of understanding, and gently nuzzle the baby's tiny hands, as if offering his own kind of reassurance. For Catherine, Brian wasn't just a dog, he was family, a pillar of strength and love that had been with her through life's most precious and challenging moments. It was this deep bond and trust that would set the stage for a moment that would forever change their lives. Catherine's pregnancy was a journey of mixed emotions, joy, anticipation, and an underlying current of worry. From the moment she discovered she was expecting, her heart filled with dreams of what the future would hold for her child. Yet, like many new mothers, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of nervousness about the unknowns. Brian, her ever-loyal dog, seemed to sense these emotions. Throughout her pregnancy, he became more attentive than ever, staying close to her side, offering quiet comfort during moments of doubt, and even resting his head on her lap as if to remind her that she wasn't alone. As the months passed and her belly grew, Catherine found herself talking to Brian about her hopes and fears. "You're going to love him," she'd whisper while stroking his soft fur. Brian would wag his tail as if to promise that he already did. When Catherine felt the baby kick for the first time, Brian was there, nudging her with his nose as though to share in the excitement. Even Brooke, who worked long hours, marveled at the connection between his wife, the baby, and their devoted dog. The day the baby boy arrived was one of overwhelming emotion. Catherine and Brooke named him Ethan, and from the moment she held him in her arms, Catherine's heart swelled with love. But it quickly became clear that Ethan's early days would be challenging. He was born with a weak immune system and struggled with bouts of fever and difficulty feeding. Doctors reassured the couple that with time and care, Ethan would grow stronger, but the weight of responsibility was heavy. Catherine threw herself into motherhood with determination, even as exhaustion crept in. Brooke's demanding job often kept him away for long hours, and while he was supportive and loving, much of the day-to-day care fell to Catherine. In those moments, Brian became her steadfast partner. He seemed to intuitively understand Ethan's fragility, staying close to the baby's crib and alerting Catherine with a gentle bark or nudge whenever something seemed off. When Ethan cried during sleepless nights, Brian would pace the room with Catherine, his presence a balm for her frayed nerves. On particularly difficult days, when Catherine felt the weight of worry pressing down on her, Brian would sit beside her, his warm presence reminding her of the strength she had within. She often marveled at his patience, watching as he gently sniffed Ethan's tiny hands or wagged his tail in delight whenever the baby cooed. Together, Catherine and Brian formed a team, caring for Ethan with a rhythm that felt almost natural. Catherine would handle the feedings, the diaper changes, and the doctor's appointments, while Brian provided emotional support and an extra set of vigilant eyes. It was as though Brian had taken on the role of a second parent, his bond with Ethan growing stronger with each passing day. Catherine often thought about how fortunate she was to have Brian in her life. He wasn't just a pet, he was a source of strength, a reminder of the power of unconditional love and a partner in the most important journey of her life. Little did she know that Brian's devotion and instincts would soon play a pivotal role in saving Ethan's life. The house was silent, except for the faint wheezing sound coming from Ethan's crib. Catherine had been up all night, keeping a vigilant eye on her baby boy. His fever hadn't subsided, and now his breathing seemed labored. She leaned over him, her heart pounding as she noticed his tiny chest struggling to rise and fall. The sight sent a chill down her spine. Something was terribly wrong. She picked him up gently, cradling him against her shoulder as her mind raced. Ethan's breaths were shallow, interrupted by moments of eerie stillness. His skin felt clammy, and his usual rosy complexion was replaced by an alarming pallor. "Stay with me, baby," she whispered, trying to mask her rising panic. Catherine grabbed her phone and dialed the emergency number, but the call didn't connect. The storm outside howled, rain lashing against the windows and disrupting the signal. She tried again and again, but the screen continued to display "call failed." Frustration and fear bubbled up inside her as she paced the room, holding Ethan tightly. Desperate, she thought about driving to the hospital herself, but the storm had turned the roads treacherous, and she was alone with a critically ill baby. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She tried calling her husband, Brooke, but the line wouldn't go through. Brian, their faithful dog, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. He stayed close, his ears perked and his eyes fixed on Ethan. When Catherine sat down, tears streaming down her face, Brian approached and rested his head on her knee. His presence was grounding, a small comfort amidst the chaos. As Catherine struggled to think clearly, Ethan's breathing grew fainter. The storm outside continued to rage, isolating them from the world. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to push through the fear. She knew she had to act. But what could she do? Every option felt impossible, and time was slipping away. Brian, who had always been a calm and dependable companion, suddenly became restless. His usual laid-back demeanor shifted into something more alert, his body rigid as his eyes never left Ethan. Catherine noticed immediately, though her mind was clouded with panic. She looked at Brian, confused, as he slowly made his way over to the crib where Ethan was lying. At first, Brian just stood there, sniffing the air intently. He circled the crib a few times, his nose twitching with urgency. Catherine tried to soothe him, assuming he was merely acting out of concern for the baby's feverish state. But then Brian did something unexpected. He nudged the baby's tiny chest with his nose, as if trying to get a reaction. The gesture was gentle but persistent, as though he was trying to communicate something was wrong. Catherine hesitated, unsure of what Brian's actions meant. She leaned over the crib, and for a moment, she thought maybe the dog was simply sensing her anxiety. But then Brian began to bark softly, almost like he was calling for attention. His bark was low and deliberate, not the playful sound she was used to. It was different, almost urgent. Panic set in as Catherine noticed that Ethan's breathing was becoming more strained. His chest was barely rising with each inhale, and his lips had started to turn a faint shade of blue. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized just how much time had passed until Brian's actions started to sink in. The dog's persistent nudging and the soft, almost pleading bark were not random. Brian was trying to tell her something. With shaky hands, Catherine reached for the bulb syringe she kept near the crib. As she picked it up, Brian stayed by her side, still watching Ethan with intense focus. His presence, though strange and somewhat unnerving in its urgency, brought Catherine a strange sense of clarity. She realized that Brian wasn't just reacting to her distress. He had detected something physically wrong with Ethan. His behavior wasn't a random act of concern, it was an instinctual reaction to the baby's critical condition. Without Brian's intervention, Catherine might have missed the signs altogether. she might not have recognized the true severity of the situation. Brian, with his sharp instincts and unexplainable behavior, had somehow known exactly what needed to be done long before she did. Catherine's mind raced as Brian's strange behavior grew more intense. At first, she dismissed it as nothing more than the dog sensing her own anxiety. After all, she had been a nervous wreck ever since Ethan's fever started spiraling out of control. But Brian's actions didn't seem random anymore. There was a deliberate purpose in his every move. He sniffed Ethan again, this time more insistently. His nose moved from the baby's head to his chest, and then he nudged Ethan gently but forcefully with his snout. Catherine's eyes widened as she noticed the dog's focus. His attention was entirely fixed on Ethan's chest. Brian then stepped back, his ears forward and his body tense, almost like he was waiting for a response. It was as though he was trying to tell her something, to alert her in some way. At first, Catherine felt a flicker of confusion. She hadn't seen Brian act like this before. She bent down to get a closer look at Ethan, who had been lying in the crib in a restless, feverish sleep. His breathing was shallow, the rise and fall of his chest too weak to be comforting, but it was more than just that. Something felt terribly wrong. Catherine's heartbeat quickened. Why hadn't she noticed this earlier? She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should wake him up. But instinct kicked in. Brian's strange nudging had piqued her concern, and now the baby's unsteady breaths had her full attention. She leaned in closer, watching Ethan carefully. His chest barely rose with each breath. It was alarming. As Catherine examined him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was blocking his airway. Her heart pounded, and the room seemed to close in on her as she started to realize the gravity of the situation. Brian's insistent nudging had been his way of alerting her. It wasn't just that the dog was worried or nervous. He knew something was wrong. Catherine looked at the dog again. This time, the realization hit her hard. Brian was trying to communicate something critical to her. This wasn't just a random act of attention. He had sensed that Ethan's life was at risk, and he had acted on it with the same urgency that a trained medical professional might show. Her confusion gave way to a deepening sense of panic, but also a quiet determination. She had to act. She had to help Ethan. The dog had shown her the way forward, and now Catherine knew she had no choice but to trust her instincts, and Brian's, if she wanted to save her son. The room was thick with panic, the kind that takes hold and clouds judgment, but Catherine knew she couldn't afford to freeze. Ethan's tiny face had turned pale, his chest barely rising. The faint gurgle in his throat was almost imperceptible, and Brian's persistent nudging and soft barks had brought her to this critical realization. Her heart raced as she cradled her baby, her mind grasping for a solution. Catherine dashed to the kitchen where she kept a small bulb syringe, a tool she had used countless times to clear Ethan's nose when he had trouble feeding. But this time, it was more dire than ever. Every second felt stretched, her hands trembling as she held Ethan close to her chest, whispering reassurances as much for herself as for him. She tilted Ethan's head back gently, just as the nurse had shown her during one of their hospital visits. His airway was partially obstructed by mucus, but her initial attempt to use the bulb syringe was clumsy. Her vision blurred with tears as she steadied herself. "Focus, Catherine," she muttered under her breath. Brian stood next to her, his quiet presence anchoring her resolve. With renewed determination, she pressed the bulb syringe into Ethan's tiny nostril, compressing and releasing it carefully. A small amount of mucus came free, but it wasn't enough. Ethan's breathing remained shallow, his cries too weak to provide relief. Catherine adjusted her grip, gently patting his back with rhythmic, deliberate motions. Each pat felt like a plea, her whispered prayers punctuating the silence. Finally, there was a breakthrough. The blockage shifted, and Ethan let out a soft, raspy cry. Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat as she suctioned again, this time removing a larger amount of mucus. The sound of Ethan's loud, desperate wail was the most beautiful noise she had ever heard. Relief coursed through her, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her baby to her chest. Brian, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, wagged his tail and let out a soft huff, as if to say, "We did it." Catherine sank to the floor, holding Ethan close while Brian nuzzled her side. The fear that had gripped her moments before was replaced by overwhelming gratitude, not only for the life of her son, but for the unwavering instincts of her loyal dog. As Ethan's breathing steadied, Catherine sat back and marveled at the events that had just unfolded. Brian's keen senses had alerted her to a danger she might not have noticed in time, and her quick actions had brought her baby back from the brink. It was a moment she would replay in her mind for years to come, a testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Ethan's loud, piercing cry shattered the tense silence that had filled the room just moments before. The sound was both jarring and miraculous, pulling Catherine out of the haze of fear that had clouded her mind. She froze for a moment, her hand still holding the bulb syringe, as the weight of what had just happened hit her. Her baby was breathing. Tears of relief streamed down her face as she held Ethan close, his tiny body trembling with each desperate, life-affirming breath. She cradled him against her chest, her heartbeat finally slowing from its frantic rhythm. His cries were strong now, a sound that, just moments earlier, she had been desperate to hear. "Oh, thank you," she whispered over and over, rocking Ethan gently. The terror that had gripped her heart slowly ebbed away, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. She looked down at her son, his chest rising and falling with the effort of crying, and marveled at the fragility and resilience of life. Brian, who had been sitting quietly by her side, seemed to sense the shift in the room. He nudged her arm gently, his dark eyes filled with understanding. Catherine reached out to stroke his head, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved him," she said softly. "You knew something was wrong." As Ethan's cries softened, he nestled into her arms, his small fingers curling around the fabric of her shirt. Catherine kissed the top of his head, the warmth of his skin against her lips a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. For the next few minutes, Catherine sat on the floor, holding Ethan and stroking Brian's fur. The storm outside raged on, but inside the house there was a calm that hadn't been there before. Catherine's gratitude extended beyond the immediate moment. She felt a deep appreciation for Brian's instincts, for the tools and knowledge she had been given, and for the inexplicable love that had guided her through the crisis. In that powerful moment, Catherine realized that she would never forget this night. It was a testament to the bond between her family and Brian, and to the strength she didn't know she had within her. Ethan's recovery felt like a second chance, a miracle that would forever remind her of the preciousness of life and the extraordinary ways it can be preserved. Brian's role in saving Ethan's life was nothing short of remarkable. As Catherine sat and reflected on the events of the night, she couldn't help but marvel at the uncanny instincts of her beloved dog. Brian's unusual behavior, his persistent nudging, soft barks, and refusal to leave Ethan's side, had been the key to uncovering the baby's distress. Without his intervention, Catherine shuddered to think how much worse the situation could have become. She thought back to the exact moment Brian started acting strangely. It wasn't just random behavior. There was purpose and urgency in his actions. His focus on Ethan, the way he had sniffed and nudged the baby's chest, and the soft, insistent sounds he made were all signs Catherine now recognized as warnings. Brian had understood something was wrong even before she did. The connection between humans and animals had always fascinated Catherine, but she had never experienced it so profoundly. Brian wasn't just a pet. He was a family member, a guardian, and in that moment, a savior. She realized that his bond with Ethan had grown just as deeply as the bond he shared with her. Brian's actions were driven by love and loyalty, qualities that transcended species and defied explanation. As she held Ethan in her arms, Catherine reached out to Brian, stroking his head with gratitude. "You're more than a dog," she whispered. "You're our angel." Brian responded with a gentle wag of his tail, his eyes filled with the quiet understanding that only animals seem to possess. This extraordinary moment solidified Catherine's belief in the incredible connection between humans and animals. Brian's instincts had saved Ethan's life, but they had also brought the family closer together. In that moment, Catherine vowed never to take Brian's presence for granted. He was a reminder of the power of unconditional love, the value of trust, and the miracles that can happen when we truly listen to the world around us. The moment Catherine and her husband Brooke shared the incredible story of Brian's heroic actions, it spread like wildfire through their small community. Initially, it was just a simple conversation among friends and neighbors, but soon, word of the miracle began to grow. Everyone who had heard the story was amazed at the bond between a family and their dog, and the life-saving instincts Brian had shown in such a critical moment. At first, it was the neighbors who couldn't stop talking about the incident. They had seen Catherine in a state of distress earlier that day, and now, Hearing about Brian's role in saving Ethan's life, they couldn't believe their ears. People in the neighborhood came over to visit, and every conversation seemed to circle back to the same thing: the dog who had saved the baby. A few days later, a local news outlet caught wind of the story. The headline read, "Dog Saves Baby, a Miraculous Act of Instinct." The reporter interviewed Catherine and Brooke, capturing their emotions as they recounted the day's harrowing events. Brooke had been away on business, and hearing the details of what had happened only deepened his gratitude for their loyal dog Brian. As the story gained traction, it didn't take long before it went viral on social media. Friends and family shared it widely, and soon, people from all over the country were sending messages of admiration and awe. Some questioned how such a remarkable act of instinct could occur, while others simply marveled at the extraordinary connection between Brian and Ethan. People sent letters and cards from all corners of the country, expressing their amazement and admiration for the dog's actions. The local media, and then national outlets, continued to feature the story. Brian's heroic act became a symbol of loyalty, love, and the often overlooked bond between humans and animals. Veterinary organizations, pet care advocates, and even animal behaviorists reached out, offering praise for Brian's incredible instincts. Some wondered if other animals might be capable of sensing medical emergencies in such a way, and scientists began to speculate on the depth of the bond between animals and humans that could allow for such a miraculous act of intervention. It wasn't just the media that took notice. Catherine and Brooke found themselves surrounded by an outpouring of support from their community, both local and virtual. Some sent donations to animal shelters in Brian's name, while others offered to help with anything the family might need. It was clear that the miracle had touched the hearts of many, and people wanted to show their gratitude for Brian's selfless actions. The family's bond with Brian grew even stronger in the weeks following the event. Though the miracle had brought them local fame, it had also made them realize how special their dog truly was. Brian wasn't just a pet anymore. He had proven that he was a guardian, a protector, and, in the truest sense, a member of the family. The couple, in their gratitude, couldn't help but feel a deep appreciation for the loyalty and love that animals like Brian so freely offer. As time went on, Brian's story continued to resonate with those who heard it, proving that sometimes the most remarkable acts of heroism come from the most unexpected places, and from the most loyal companions we have by our side. As Catherine and Brooke sat together, reflecting on the life-changing events of that fateful day, they realized that Brian's incredible actions deserved to be honored in a meaningful way. The miracle that had unfolded, how their loyal dog had sensed their baby's distress and saved his life, had left them both in awe. After everything that had happened, there seemed to be no more fitting tribute than to name their newborn son after the dog who had so bravely protected him. It was a deeply emotional decision. Catherine had always loved Brian as part of their family, but in that moment she recognized that he was far more than just a pet. Brian had saved their son's life through his extraordinary instincts, and naming the baby after him felt like a way of solidifying his place in their hearts forever. It was a gesture of deep gratitude, a way to carry Brian's legacy into their child's future. Brooke, though initially taken aback by the idea, soon agreed. He saw the bond between Brian and their son as something truly special. As they discussed it, they both came to realize that this was more than just about honoring Brian's bravery. It was about acknowledging the deep connection that had existed between animals and humans throughout history. By naming their son Brian, they were paying homage to the animal kingdom and to the unfathomable ways in which animals could enrich and protect human lives. The decision wasn't just symbolic, it was personal. Catherine and Brooke wanted to honor the incredible bond they shared with Brian, whose calm presence had been a constant source of comfort and protection. Brian had been there for them long before the miracle happened. He had been by their side through everyday joys and challenges, quietly fulfilling the role of protector, friend, and confidant. Naming their son after Brian became a powerful reminder that their family was stronger than ever, united not only by blood, but by love and loyalty. Brian wasn't just the family dog anymore. He was an integral part of their family's story, and they wanted to ensure that everyone who met their son would understand the incredible role the dog had played in his life. As they gazed at their baby, now healthy and thriving, Catherine and Brooke felt a deep sense of peace. Naming him Brian was a fitting tribute, and every time they spoke his name, they would remember the miracle, the connection, and the love that had saved their son's life. The family's bond had deepened in ways they never thought possible, and as Brian grew, they would be reminded of the unwavering loyalty and love that had brought them together on that extraordinary day. The incredible event that had unfolded with Brian not only saved their baby, but also transformed the entire dynamic of Catherine and Brooke's family. In the days and weeks that followed, they found themselves reflecting on how much deeper their bond had become, both as a couple and as a family. The traumatic, yet miraculous experience had brought them closer, united by the shared understanding of just how fragile life can be. It had underscored the importance of never taking a single moment for granted, and they found a renewed sense of gratitude for each other, their child, and the animals they loved. Catherine and Brooke had always been close, but the intensity of the events had forged an unbreakable strength in their relationship. The act of teamwork they had both shown during the crisis, Catherine's calmness, even in the face of uncertainty, and Brooke's trust in her to handle the situation, even from afar, had instilled a deeper respect between them. They now understood that life, with all its unpredictability, could be navigated with courage, especially when they worked together. The miracle that Brian had performed served as a constant reminder that in times of danger, love and family came first, and that the support of a loyal companion, whether human or animal, was the greatest gift. Brian's continued role in their home became even more significant. What had started as a typical family dynamic, where Brian was a beloved pet and family member, had evolved into a deeper relationship. Brian was no longer just the dog. He had become a symbol of protection, loyalty, and courage. The family would often joke that Brian was their guardian angel, watching over them in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Yet for Catherine and Brooke, it was no longer a joke. It was their reality. Brian had saved their child, and in doing so, had reaffirmed his place as an irreplaceable part of their family. His continued presence in their lives became a reminder of that fateful day, and every time the family sat together, whether on the couch, at the dinner table, or out in the backyard, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Brian's calm, loving demeanor was now an anchor for the family. They began to see him as the protector of their home, always by their side, always there in moments of need, not just because he was their pet, but because of the unique, almost mystical connection they had with him. Brian's status as a family hero was solidified in every small, everyday moment, whether it was sitting by the baby's crib or simply being there when one of them was feeling down. Brian embodied the essence of what it meant to be a protector. Catherine and Brooke often reflected on the incredible timing of his actions. If it hadn't been for Brian's swift and intuitive response to the baby's distress, things might have turned out very differently. They couldn't imagine life without him, and each passing day deepened their appreciation for him. Their appreciation for life had also been altered. They saw each moment with a sense of profound gratitude, cherishing time spent with one another and with Brian. Family dinners, strolls in the park, and quiet nights in front of the fireplace became cherished rituals. They knew that life was unpredictable, and every day was a blessing. The experience had also inspired Catherine and Brooke to give more of themselves to others, whether through volunteer work or simply offering kindness to strangers. Brian's selfless act of heroism had served as a reminder that the simplest acts, like showing up, being present, and caring for those around you, can make the biggest difference in the world. In essence, Brian had not just saved the life of a baby, he had brought a family closer, reinforced the love between them, and deepened their respect for life, for animals, and for the extraordinary ways in which both intersect. And for Catherine and Brooke, there would never be a day that passed where they didn't recognize the incredible gift they had in their loyal dog, Brian. As Catherine and Brooke reflected on the extraordinary events that had forever changed their lives, they found themselves overwhelmed by a deep sense of gratitude. The miracle that Brian had orchestrated was not just a matter of a pet saving their baby. It was a poignant reminder of the powerful, unspoken bond that exists between humans and animals. In that moment of crisis, Brian had transcended the role of a pet, becoming something far more significant, a protector, a hero and a guardian angel. Catherine, with her heart full of appreciation, often found herself thinking about how Brian had sensed the baby's distress long before she could have realized something was wrong. She marveled at the extraordinary instincts animals possess, something that humans can only begin to comprehend. "He wasn't just a dog to us," Catherine shared with a smile, her voice filled with emotion. "He's family." In that moment, Brian didn't just act like a dog, He acted like a protector, doing what any loving family member would do. Brooke, equally moved by the events, added his thoughts. I'll never be able to fully understand how Brian knew what to do in that moment, but I do know this: he saved our son's life. He gave us more than we could have ever expected. He gave us hope when everything seemed lost. For Brooke, the incident had reshaped how he viewed their pet. Brian was no longer just a companion to him, but a hero who had stepped up when it mattered most. As the family moved forward, they carried with them a deep appreciation for the unique relationship between humans and animals. Brian's actions had shown them that animals have an intuitive understanding of the world around them, a sensitivity that often goes unnoticed, but can be life-saving when it matters. It was a bond built on trust, loyalty, and instinct, qualities that often surpass human understanding, but are essential to the deep connection between people and their animal companions. Catherine and Brooke now understood more than ever that the love shared between humans and animals is not just about companionship. It is about the unspoken support, protection, and guidance that animals can offer in the most unexpected moments. Brian's quiet, steady presence had not only provided comfort, but had saved a life, a testament to the profound impact that animals can have on their owners. As they looked at their son, named Brian in honor of the dog who had given him a second chance at life, Catherine and Brooke knew that this experience would stay with them forever. The bond they shared with their dog would never be forgotten. Brian had not only changed their son's life, he had changed their lives in ways that words could not fully express. It was a celebration of the incredible connection that exists between humans and the animals that share their lives, a connection that is as mysterious as it is powerful. In that quiet moment of reflection, as the family sat together, they knew that they would continue to live with gratitude for the miraculous gift of life and love that Brian had given them. And as Brian lay by their feet, content and calm, they realized that some bonds, those between humans and animals, could not be explained, only felt, cherished, and celebrated. The story of Brian's extraordinary act of heroism quickly became a beacon of inspiration, not just for those who knew Catherine and Brooke, but for countless others who heard about the miraculous event. The news spread far beyond their small community, capturing the hearts of people everywhere who marveled at the unlikely heroism of a family dog. It wasn't just about the incredible timing and instincts Brian demonstrated. It was about the powerful message that emerged from the event, the deep, almost mystical bond between humans and their animal companions. As word of the story spread, it resonated with people from all walks of life. Animal lovers, parents, and even skeptics couldn't help but be moved by the idea that an animal's intuition could save a life in such a profound way. It sparked conversations about the role animals play in our lives, not just as pets or companions, but as protectors, guides, and unsung heroes who, in many cases, sense things that humans cannot. Brian's legacy became more than just a single moment of bravery. It became a symbol of the strength of the connection between humans and their pets, a reminder that animals are far more attuned to us than we often realize. Local newspapers, online blogs, and social media platforms began to feature the story, with many celebrating the heroic act and emphasizing the lesson it imparted. For families with pets, the story became a reminder to appreciate and honor the bond they share with their animals. For animal lovers, it was a testament to the powerful unspoken communication that exists between humans and animals, one that transcends language and often defies explanation. Brian, the family dog, had become a living symbol of that truth. In addition to the public reaction, the family received messages from around the world. People shared their own stories of their pets' heroic actions and their deep emotional connections with them. The story had not only showcased Brian's intelligence and compassion, but it had also sparked a broader conversation about the nature of the relationships we build with animals, relationships that often go unrecognized until a critical moment like this, one brings their importance to the forefront. It was as if the entire world had been reminded of the profound impact pets can have, not just on our hearts, but on our lives in ways that we might never fully understand. Brian's legacy also extended into more formal spheres. Animal welfare organizations began to use the story as a powerful example of how animals can be protectors and saviors, advocating for the unique roles pets play in their family's well-being. The story became part of larger conversations about animal behavior and the incredible things pets are capable of when placed in extraordinary circumstances. For Catherine and Brooke, the overwhelming response to Brian's actions had a humbling effect. It was a reminder that the bond they shared with their dog was not only extraordinary, but also something that others could relate to, learn from, and be inspired by. As time passed, the family made sure that Brian's role in their lives would not be forgotten. They continued to share their story with others, spreading a message of gratitude, love, and the powerful, almost mystical connection between humans and animals. In the years that followed, Brian remained a central part of their lives, always by their side. His legacy lived on, not just in the pages of their family's history, but also in the hearts of all who had been touched by the story. The family often reflected on the miraculous events that led to their son's survival, but they also took solace in knowing that their story had inspired others to look at their pets in a new light. Brian's heroic act was a reminder that the extraordinary can happen in the most unlikely of circumstances, and that the bonds we share with our pets can be some of the most profound connections we will ever experience. For Catherine, Brooke, and their children, Brian was no longer just a family pet. He was a symbol of love, loyalty, and sacrifice, and his legacy lived on as a testament to the extraordinary ways animals can touch our lives, often in ways that change the course of our destiny. Brian, the dog who saved their son, would forever be a part of their family's story, a story of love, gratitude, and the miracle of life. As Catherine reflects on the miraculous events that unfolded that fateful day, she finds herself hoping that their story can serve as a reminder to others. She wishes to encourage people everywhere to look at their animals with new eyes, recognizing not just their companionship, but the incredible role they play in our lives. Animals are more than pets, Catherine often says with a smile. They're family, protectors, and sometimes even heroes. We owe it to them to cherish them and respect the instincts they bring into our homes. She understands now more than ever that animals possess an incredible ability to sense our needs, often before we even realize what we need ourselves. Brian had shown her that love and loyalty go beyond simple gestures. They are often silent, powerful, and life-changing. Her hope is that her story will inspire others to appreciate the depths of connection they share with their pets, to never take that bond for granted, and to recognize that in many ways animals are constantly watching over us, ready to protect us in ways we could never have imagined. In the closing moments of their story, Catherine, Brooke, and their children gather together with Brian in their backyard. The sun is setting, casting a warm golden glow over their little family, as Brian lies peacefully at their feet, content and calm. It's a picture of love and loyalty, a scene of tranquility and unity that symbolizes everything they've been through together. Brian, the hero of the story, watches his family with an unspoken understanding in his eyes. The connection they share is clear, not just in the moments of crisis, but in every ordinary day. It's in the way Brian nudges the children as they play, how he lies protectively by the door when Brooke is away, and how he simply sits by Catherine's side, offering silent comfort after a long day. This is the love they share, a love that was tested in a moment of fear, and now stands as a testament to the extraordinary power of the bond between humans and their pets. With Brian at their side, the family knows that they have something truly special. As they sit together sharing stories and laughter, Catherine and Brooke are filled with gratitude. They know they've been given a gift of love, loyalty, and the unforgettable reminder that the deepest connections we share often come from the most unexpected places. Their family is complete, and their hearts are full, thanks to the miracle that their beloved dog Brian gave them that day. And as Brian rests peacefully by their side, they are reminded that this love, this bond, will last forever. For Catherine, Brooke, and their children, this is not just a story about a dog. It's a story about the heartwarming truth that sometimes the most profound acts of love come from those who are closest to us. And often, the most unexpected heroes are the ones who have been with us all along.